Melissa.
Sarah.
What are we doing today?
We're kicking off season 3 by chatting with author Heidi Wicks.
Heidi, I would like to just thank you for being with us today. We have been looking forward to this all summer.
Oh my gosh, I should be thanking you. I would never have imagined you would choose my book as the reading buddy pick. I just sent you guys a message and said, hey, can I come on your show? And I didn't expect near this amount of attention. So thank you.
Sarah and I, as we are often known to say, we just love opportunities to talk to each other. And when we can package them as projects or podcast related endeavors, it just means we get to chat even more. So this was, a great and really fun way for us to read your book, but do it together. And that was really great. So obviously, we're going to spend most of our conversation today talking about your writerly pursuits. But first, we want to talk about your readerly pursuits. So can we start with summer reads? What titles did you pick up this summer?
Well, I happen to have a stack here next to me of some of the things I have read. I'm reading this right now, Angela Angel's Saltbox Olive. It's amazing. It's a story like on 2 timelines, a woman who's in her 50s and has discovered some family secrets. So it goes back and forth between current time and World War II. So it's very captivating. Highly recommend. I've been on a bit of a Heather O'Neill kick lately. So this is her newest one with her daughter, Arizona O'Neill. It's amazing. It was originally a serial that was written for the Montreal Gazette, and it was published week by week. So they published it in book form. Fantastic, about a woman who works at a cafe in one of the Montreal metro stations, and it's like surrealist, and she finds her doppelganger in another station, and then there's this whole other existence where her doppelganger is in the circus, and it's a wild ride, and I love it. And then I also read The Capital of Dreams, which is the one that came out before this one. Just fabulous, about a society that is built on the arts and writers and artists, and they are in a war, so it's sort of a wartime fairy tale, just wacky. I love her. And the other one I'm going to mention is Invisible Prisons, Lisa Moore and Jack Whalen. It should be required reading, I think. Worth the winter set, worth everything. So those are just a few of my summer picks.
Oh, that's awesome. I'm also reading Heather O'Neill. You and I are reading Heather O'Neill for probably the same reason, because she will be gracing the shores of our fair province later this fall. So I am currently reading the Valentine in Montreal one. And I was a big fan of Lullabies for Little Criminals.
Yeah, that was her breakout one.
I loved that book. And then I never read anything else by her. And then as I've been going through this one, I'm like, oh, geez, yeah, this is why I loved her so much. Like, why did I leave this alone for so many years? But yeah, I'm really into it, especially because I love short chapters. And because it was serialized, it's like you can literally just read a chunk of it while you're waiting for your tea to steep or something. Like, it's so easy to fit into your life. So I love that.
And I'm sure as a writer, you not only like books and authors, but I'm sure some of your favorite books and authors have probably also been kind of inspiration for you. So would you want to talk a little bit about works or authors who've influenced your writing?
Yeah, sure. Lisa is Lisa Moore is a massive mentor, idol. She's the first creative writing teacher that I ever had. I think it was 2006 was my first writing course. And she was my thesis supervisor when I did my MA in creative writing. And so my first book would never have been published without Lisa, I'm sure. She's an absolute angel, so generous with her time and advice. And her writing is incredible. It's so sensual, and you can feel every feeling just in one little steep of the teapot. So she is definitely high on the list. I already mentioned Heather O'Neill. I love Anne-Marie MacDonald. She's just so, again, with the details and the whole other worlds that she creates, and you forget that you're in the world that you live in. When I was writing here, I was really captivated by I'm going to say it in an accent, Isabel Allende, The House of the Spirits, which was about a multi-generational family who lived in this house that was sort of not really haunted, but I guess, it inhabited the energies of previous generations. So that was really layered and mystical and a little bit surreal. And so those are a few.
How lucky are we in this province? I mean, Lisa Moore is a legend. She's just like an amazing figure, and that so many people have benefited from her presence here as writers. But then those of us who are readers too, like the influence that she's had, but just her creative output. And we love an opportunity to sing her praises here because Sarah and I are both huge fans.
She's an angel.
Okay, I think with all of that said, let's really get chatting in earnest about your latest book, a collection of short stories called Here. So for listeners who aren't familiar with the book, it's important to know that all stories of the book are connected to one singular house on Circular Road in St. John's, Newfoundland. Not all of the stories are explicitly set in that space, but all stories have a connection to that place. Can you talk to us about the impulse to connect all of these characters and all of these stories to one address?
Sure. This is definitely a COVID book. The first idea for a story didn't end up really being in the book at all, but it was an idea for two people who were quarantining in an apartment building, and they started sort of communicating with each other through music, through like their playlist.
Wow.
So from there, I was like, that's a cool idea, but I don't really know how to write it. What would the dialogue be? It didn't feel super sustainable. But then I guess from there, I just started thinking about people trapped in their spaces and, wanting to be connected despite that we were all physically separated, which then spun off into the history of a lot of houses in St. John's and, a lot of walking around the neighborhood. So I live in the neighborhood where the house is that's in the book. So just walking around those old colonial mansions in St. John's and like stopping to look at the plaques next to some of them. And then that went into, research about what families lived in what houses and, what the histories of different houses were. So I started writing stories that could have been set in any colonial mansion in St. John's. But then I got some early advice from Sharon Bala, actually. She did a partial manuscript evaluation for me. And her suggestion was to just pick one house and find a way to get into that house, because then you'll be able to feel the air in there and, you'll be able to picture where the stories are taking place, and it'll help the writing, I think. So because Joey Smallwood was sort of a peripheral character in the book, I knew that Canada House, which is 74 Circular Road, he lived there and his offices were there for almost 20 years. So I decided to pick that one, and I found my way into it. And it was kind of funny, actually. That same day that I was walking home from that viewing, I ran into just a friend in the neighborhood and told them what I was up to. And she said, "Oh, I have a friend actually who lived in that house for 30 years, and she's going to be in town later this month. Do you want to meet her?" So, of course, I was like, yeah. So I met this woman who lived in the house. We sat down and had a coffee, and it was like we were long lost cousins or something. I mean, she told me everything about the house. She knew I was writing a book about the house, and so she really helped bring it to life for me. And actually the ballerina storyline is kind of based on her living in the house, and her mother was a world-class ballerina. Yeah, so it grew from there, and it became about connections and disconnections and those things existing next to each other.
It might be worth noting that I wrote down that question in the margins as I was reading Joe's Pink Popsicle, because that was really one of the moments when I was like, oh, this is so about interconnections of people, interconnections of families, and it happening in a common space. And I'd like to claim this as a very Newfoundland thing, but I feel like we're always looking for connections. And I was kind of laughing to myself when you said, I felt like we were long lost cousins. You probably are long lost cousins with whoever that woman is, because that's the way things roll in this province, right? Like we are so layered with one another. And I think that's a beautiful thing. And I felt myself having the same impulse with the stories as I do with people that I meet, right? It's like, oh, who are you? Where are you from? Who are you related to? Who are you connected to?
Mhm.
And so the idea of like that same interaction with the stories, because Sarah and I talked a lot while we were reading it together about trying to find the connections, right? Like the sort of beautiful mind red yarn map that we would have of how it all sort of mixed together. So that same interaction with the stories, I wanted to know how I had even tangentially already encountered some of these characters.
Melissa and I have both each individually lived in downtown St. John's, at points in our lives. And there is this idea of downtown and the community that's there, all of these people living in close proximity. And they all have their own individual little stories. And sometimes these stories connect and sometimes they don't, but there's so much life. To echo what Melissa said, I mean, yeah, you can't go anywhere in Newfoundland without somehow encountering someone's aunt or cousin or someone's old roommate from Munn or
Yeah, it's small too, and it becomes apparent downtown, I think, because it
Yeah.
is so concentrated, and a lot of people who live downtown have the same interests and are
Mhm.
the same kind of communities that way. So there's a lot of history here too, right?
So we did put it out to our listeners if they had questions. And it does seem like everyone is quite, fixated on the house itself. Any other sort of deep cuts from the brain of the author about the house, your relationship with it, and your choice of that house?
Yeah, so there are secret passageway, strange doors in the bottom of the
Ooh.
house. And I've spoken to people who have been in downtown houses or had a friend that live in downtown houses that do have doorways that lead to tunnels that connect to other parts of downtown. So that's a real thing. I met another person who lived in the house for 30 years, and she was very generous with all the details of what it was like, and that it was so full of life. And, it was kind of like a Dr. Dolittle house. So there was, tons of animals and plants and just everything under the sun. So that's why it was that particular house. But of course, that's not the house that's on the cover.
Oh,
Yeah. So Duncan Major did the cover design of this book, amazing artist and graphic artist. So we had a chat on the phone and I told him all of this stuff that, it could be any colonial mansion. So I said, you do what inspires you. And so he walked around and did a sketch of this house, which is also on Circular Road. And yeah, it's just interesting. The book is about connections, but since it's come out, there's been a lot of cool connections because it turns out I know the person who lives in the house on the cover also, and St. John's, right? And she came to the book launch and she was like, I can't believe this. I'm buying a copy for each of my family members. And, a lot of the stories in the book resonate. And then I ran into another coworker after it came out, a former coworker, who said that his aunt lived in 74 Circular Road for 30 years. And he said, I had the worst nightmare of my entire life while I was staying at that house one night.
Oh.
And then that same day, I ran into another friend. She was reading the book at the time, and she said her mother lived in an apartment in a house on Circular Road. And I said, did it happen to be 74 Circular Road? And she checked with her mom, and it was 74. And it was like the same time as the colleague who had told me that his aunt lived there for 30 years. Yeah, isn't that weird that they both reached out on the same day and
Wow.
they people that lived in the house at the same time? So, and then it turns out that the second person who I ran into, her mother dated one of the people her father dated one of the sisters that was living in the big part of the house with the aunt before he met her mother, if that makes sense.
yeah.
It does. And it is such a St. John's thing. Actually, when I was looking at your acknowledgments, like after I finished, Duncan was actually doing an English degree when I was finishing up my honors degree, like during undergrad, because I was like, Duncan, and he's a real cutie too. And I remembered him and I was like, oh, I wonder like if and of course it's the same person. So
yeah.
This is exactly the type of deep track I was after here, because I was like Google mapping my way around Circular Road. And I was like, these addresses aren't adding up. And then actually, Sarah, this is the link that I sent you, that Heritage NL thing, which totally is the house on the cover. But then I found like an MLS listing of 74 Circular Road from like 2024. So then, of course, it had all kinds of great photos of the inside of the house, which was spectacular. But I was like, that's not the same exterior photo. So it all makes sense now.
Awesome. Yeah, I thought it worked because, you know, I wanted there to be a sense of lack of physical groundedness, if that makes sense. Like, I think being in the one house helped the writing, but I also wanted there to be some kind of sense of just being in space, and like that the same things can happen to people who live in any house. So the essence of a house, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I love that it also pushes people away from this, like, well, did that really happen? Well, did that really happen? Like, well, yes, it did, and it didn't, and it was, and it wasn't. And it just gives that sort of ambiguity. I like that, the multiverse type approach for sure.
This one significant item that we hear about in multiple stories is the mirror that's at the bottom of the stairs. So can you talk about the role and the presence of that?
When I found my way into the house, the mirror was actually there. You know, it's still, I've been told that it's been in there for a long time. There are certain things that Smallwood brought, you know, from Europe and different places that have just remained in the house, and the mirror was one of those. So my intention for the mirror was just for somebody to look in it and see themselves almost in a parallel reality, or you know, maybe in the future, or maybe what they looked like, a different version of themselves, a version that they wanted to be, or a version that they feared. So it's intended to be a reflection of some part of their conscious or maybe subconscious that comes out during a pivotal time in each of their own existence.
And two, I feel like this idea of like a mirror capturing and trapping certain moments, and it's kind of a haunted item, really, when we think about it in the context of a lot of the stories.
Yeah, I didn't want it to be like an overt haunted house, creepy story, but I definitely wanted to play with certain elements of a haunted house. And, you know, in a lot of haunted movies, you see that big gold gilded mirror, like creepy images or something behind you. So I definitely wanted to have certain elements of a haunted house. So that's another role of the mirror.
Again, as someone who lived in downtown St. John's, like I lived in a row house on Gower Street, and I would think about, like, I wonder who the people were that lived in this house, that walked up and down these stairs, that had their hand, you know, kind of gliding along the banister, and what their stories were. And so I felt like that really captured that idea well, of like these houses, they absorb the energy that is in them throughout time that's passing. And I really enjoyed that. And
my house also has a mirror at the top of the stairs. And I know the person who lived here before me was a belly dancer. So how many times do I go up the stairs and imagine her, like, you know, belly dancing,
undulating in front of the mirror?
A whole other anatomy of a wave, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
One thing that really struck me about the house, and in relation to the mirror, I guess, was how dynamic the house was, right? Like that there was world events happening, there were domestic events happening, and that's what your house is, right? That is the setting for your life. Whatever's going on outside of the house or inside of the house, this is where you're experiencing it. And I thought about, you know, all of that movement and people coming and going, and you've got economic depressions and pandemics and you name it. But we often pause before a mirror. That is a space where often we'll see ourselves and we'll take a moment, and things can still be happening behind us and around us, but we do take that moment in front of a mirror to look at ourselves, or that's sometimes the purpose of it being there. So I did think it kind of captured that dynamic element of the house itself, and then gave it some stillness, which I thought was cool.
Yeah, it's kind of like a pause in time, you know, when you stop to look at the mirror, the time has stopped for a minute and you're just thinking about whatever. And you hear those, you know, sometimes in stories, people will get stuck inside a mirror, like in fairy tales and stuff. So a highly used object in fiction.
Okay, let's play a game. And Sarah and I are already cheaters at this game because we know the game is coming and we've prepared. So
I'm so intrigued by this game.
Yeah, no, it'll be easy. Don't worry. Shannon McLeod reviewed your book. She organized the themes of here into 4 categories. So I thought it would be fun for Sarah and I to also categorize the themes of your work into 4 words. And then we're either going to ask you to pick 4 of those words or pick 4 of your own words, or even just comment on whether or not, like, oh my gosh, you guys just did not get this at all. None of these words are working for me. But although we cheated and we prepared, I don't actually know Sarah's words. So even though I told her to prepare some, I don't know what they are.
Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Nice. Okay.
So to start, the words that Shannon McLeod listed were family, perseverance, redemption, and survival. So those were her 4 words. My 4 words, which in true Melissa form is really more like 6 or 8 words, but I put them close together so it'll feel more like 4. The first one is interconnectedness. My second one is rural urban. I'm using that as one category, even though it's 2 words. I also used family. I tried to avoid it, but I really think family is important enough that I also wanted that in my list. And I'm a cheater and a plagiarizer because number 4, I'm going to plagiarize you, Heidi, and we'll get back to this later, but collective essences was my 4th. So those are mine. Sarah, what are yours?
All right. Isolation versus community was number 1. 2 is identity. 3, time. And perception.
Nice.
Very nice.
So Heidi, it's your call. Do you want to just give 4 categories as well? No questions asked, just 4 words or jumbles of words? Or do you want to borrow from ours, or do you just want to comment on what you've heard?
Yeah, I'd like to do maybe a combination of both. I'm going to pick from all 12 of these words. Definitely identity, perception, time. What's the 4th one going to be? And yeah, I think connectedness. It would have to be about connectedness / community.
So you're just like us.
Nice.
Yeah, I'm a cheater too.
We're very verbose people, and that's
So
okay.
I'm looking at these.
So,
words,
it must feel kind of good, I guess. I feel like between all of us,
We got it.
captured it. Yeah. Like, how
Nailed
does that
it.
feel as a writer to be like, okay, people are getting it?
Oh, it's great. It's hard when I have a writing group. We get together every second Thursday. We're called Write Club. We even have a logo. It's like Fight Club, but instead of the soap, it's cheese.
Oh, I love it.
We love cheese there. We were talking about getting our ideas across, and just how in earlier drafts, when you read it back, you're like, my God, I'm hitting readers over the head with this. Like, there's no way people are not going to know it's about connectedness. And then you start chipping away at it and like peeling back a little bit. And Jennifer May Newhook, who's a beautiful poet and fiction writer, said, it's kind of like scaffolding. It's like when you're building the house, there's a ton of scaffolding there, and then as it gets built, then you figure out which pieces are safe to take away and all that. So I'm glad that people are getting it. It means that I'm human and I'm able to connect with other humans. But yeah, that was my goal with it. Like, I really tried to push myself as a writer and with this book. And yeah, so I'm glad that people are connecting to it and getting it. And I hope that readers are not like, oh my God, how many more times can you say collective essence?
I feel like when I was reading it, I could feel you kind of stretching those muscles of really trying to kind of have distinct stories, even though they're all connected, that they were all not only distinct in the characters and whatever the theme was for that particular story, but even just the way that they were written. And I really appreciate that. And I feel like, too, there's something for everyone in this collection because, I was even saying to Melissa about, like 6 cents a day, like, oh, it's like kind of like a historical fiction. Like, there were parts that were more kind of poetic and more, as I've said, like experimental, like turns to in particular was something that I really struck me and was so distinct from everything else in it. how great to be able to do that in a collection, but still maintain this sense of connectivity between all of the stories.
Yeah, well, thank you. The big piece was during my first round of edits when it was getting ready to be published. I worked with Kate Kennedy, who I have nothing bad to say. She's an amazing editor, and I really enjoyed that experience. Her biggest piece of advice, or what she was craving the most, was more connections in the story, actually. So during that process, the stories were originally much more separate than they ended up being. But she was like, oh, I don't understand how this story fits in with the rest of them, and what is the tie-in between this story and the rest. So she really wanted all of them to be connected. And so I had a map drawn on a whiteboard, like my terrible elementary school level drawing of the house with stick people and stuff in the rooms. And, you know, I did a timeline of who lived in each section of the house. So I ended up changing some characters so that they were the same people as in other stories, just to strengthen all of those connections. And I'm thankful for that advice, because I think people do seem to be getting that kind of game thing out of it, where they try to piece together who's who. The process ended up being more like writing a novel, I think, than I had originally intended it to be, because originally I thought they were just going to be playing with different forms and stories that were set in the house, the odd one in the neighborhood. But I'm glad that she pushed me that way, because I think it made it a lot better, a better book.
I feel like it also lends itself good to like a reread, because as you are reading each story and kind of trying to put these pieces together, I feel like you can get something new when you read each story a second time.
Yeah, I've heard that a couple times too.
Yeah, I ended up reading a few of them twice. And one of them was Anatomy of a Wave. So Sarah and I were also like taking pictures of like, oh, I'm reading it here. Like just again, as a way for us to keep in touch. So I was like camping and she was at the beach and, you know, just, oh, I'm reading this one. So I had sent her a picture of like the cover page of Anatomy of a Wave. And don't get me wrong, like I had liked the story, but when I sent the picture to Sarah, she was like, oh, that's my favorite one so far. And I was like, I'm going back to read that again, because she's saying this is her favorite one so far. And I had a different favorite one. So I was like, I really want to kind of decipher it. So we were driving because we had been camping for the weekend. And I just said to my husband, like, can I just read this out loud to you while we're driving? And I was like crying at the end. So this like story that I had kind of just glazed past at the beach. And of course, I don't want to spoil it, but you girls both know how the story ends. And I think that was also where I was coming up with this whole idea of like the domestic moments that happen in a house alongside larger international moments. A girl getting her period, you know, like that's huge in your house, but it's not going to be huge anywhere else. But yet it's so significant in your life. And it all happens at home.
One of the things that kind of came up as we were both reading was male characters in the book. We do feel like the stories are, for the most part, really female centered and female oriented, but there are some very distinct male characters in the book. And for a lot of them, they're not necessarily particularly likable. And so, as Melissa has liked to say, there's like a slew of bad dads that are are featured. And we even see some acts of extreme violence towards some of these men. So were you hoping that readers would read more deeply and find sympathy for those men? Or were you exposing the bad men of the world through the stories? Or neither?
That's a good question. My intention, actually, believe it or not, I was wanting to be sympathetic to the men. I mean, to some of them, not all of them. But, you know, I was trying to get at the trauma that a lot of men went through, and, you know, the patriarchal society that men were raised in, and, you know, dads who had some feeling, they didn't understand where it came from, so they'd try to drink until the feeling went away. And, you know, a lot of men, I think, suffered because of that when they grew up. So I was trying to get at that. And I think I had some male characters that were more sympathetic than others. Poor old Ben in Midnight Toast, I really felt a lot for him. He was just a lost soul, you know, and didn't have the confidence to go after what he wanted. He was a bit of a flat kind of pancake. That's another term that came from my Right Club, was pancake men. Well, that's Melanie's. I don't want them to be pancakes. So I started building more of a backstory for them to try to explain why they were that way. So I mean, of course, I find it more natural to write female characters. I am a female. A lot of the people in my life are females, but I know a lot of great men too. So I'm not a man hater or anything like that. It's another way that I was trying to stretch myself as a writer because my first book was very female centric. So to your question, it is kind of both. Some of them were being exposed, and Eddie in the first story, I think when he was a younger man, he had more promise. But as life went on and the expectations that his own father put on him, things weren't working out in his family situation, and he sort of didn't really bloom the way he would have maybe if he had a therapist or something.
I felt like the character of Ben and the kind of journey, the trip, so to speak, that he goes through that New Year's Eve, it ends in this really unexpected but really hopeful way. And I did really like that.
Oh, good.
And the fact that you're ending it with Circular and Bob, and we're returning to Bobby, who we begin the collection with, and you really get to see how he has evolved as a character in the world. And I mean, that's a really bittersweet story, I think, but really appreciating like him and who he is. And you're ending off on a note where Bobby is someone who we like quite a bit. And he kind of started off as a bit of a loaf, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's part of why I decided to end it with Bobby again. And, because he was a bit of a pancake in the first story, but the ending of the first story, I think, indicates that there's more to him. And then bringing it back to Circular shows the journey that he's gone on throughout his life. And I'm glad you liked that.
Okay. Do you have a favorite of the stories?
Good question. I do have a soft spot for Anatomy of a Wave also because, it is a family story for me. Like Merle and Cyril are my grandparents. So my paternal grandmother was Muriel, and my maternal grandfather was Cyril. So this is a little tidbit of like what things are real and what aren't in a story. But I also had a friend with grandparents whose names matched. And that's where the line "riding on a crest of a wave" came from. He told me the story of his grandparents. And anyway, I just really liked that the names matched. But the story of the strawberry patch and like caretaking at another property, that's something that my paternal grandmother did. And so the details are all kind of a mixture of my maternal and paternal sides. So that one is special to me for that reason. I also like Verisimilitude, the one that starts at Hotel Bonaventure. I'm just kind of happy with the way that one turned out. And I like Turns too, the micro novel, just because I liked playing with the form, and it was something different than I'd ever done before. So yeah,
all three are among my favorites.
Heidi, we really want to thank you for sharing your book with us and for bringing us into 74 Circular Road this summer. Your book here was like a Forrest Gump of Newfoundland history. It was like the house touched so many important moments that shaped this place. And in your acknowledgments, you thank, and I'm quoting, "the collective essences of Newfoundlanders and Labradorians." That really resonated with me, generally speaking, but also in relation to the interconnectedness that you explored in this book. I think we're suckers for our own history in this province. And this book fits really well within a collection of books and stories that share and explore our history, our evolving identity, and as you so beautifully put it, our collective essence.
And I just want to thank you for helping to bring me to Newfoundland this summer. It is a place that is always close to my heart, even though I may be a very, very far distance away. And anytime I get to return to the city of St. John's, either in person or through a book, is a special thing for me to be able to do. And my time with Melissa and our MA program, that was kind of the peak of my youth, and it happened to take place in St. John's. So I just want to thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you for being our guest. This has been great. And I would just say to all of our listeners who haven't picked up this book yet, I could tell you that you should read it. But instead, I'm just going to simply say that you must check it out for yourself.
Thank you both so much for having me on again. I am so honored that you took the time to chat about it and post about it. And your questions were wonderful. I loved watching all of the posts, and I love that you do this podcast, that you stay connected this way, and that your time in your MA program was so special. And I just look up to you for that, because I know podcasting is not easy. So you have to really love it to do it, and you're great at it. So thank you. I feel very grateful and honored that we did this.
Well, next time the three of us are in St. John's at the same time, we'll have to get together in person.
Absolutely. I would love to.